Good evening guys, I'm Chris and welcome back to this Wednesday's episode of Rift Amps. Okay, Blues Junior. You've all seen these before. This one has come in from a working musician who sent me this video. And as you can see, one of the output valves is clearly arcing. Now, for those that don't know, Blues Juniors from the factory are biased incredibly hot, so seeing output valve failures is not uncommon. However, here in the UK, they've made that even worse. So not only are the output valves biased extremely hot, the mains voltage for the amplifier is set for 230 volts, whereas what actually comes out of our wall here in the UK is 240 volts, or sometimes even higher. Now, curiously, inside most modern fenders sold for the UK EU market, they have a 240 volt tap, which I assume is actually for Australian customers. So combine an extremely hot bias anyway, plus then increased internal voltages because of the primary voltage being set too low, results in these things absolutely cooking their output valves. So it's one of the most common things that we deal with on Blues Juniors. You know, I've often been in guitar shops, seen these on the shop floor, stuck my head in the back, and you can see the output valves are cooked and they're brand new amps. It's bizarre. Anyway, the owner of this amp has had it about 10 years, and she uses it regularly out on the road. I think does lots of theatre shows and stuff like that. So it's a workhorse amp for her, and it needs to be good and reliable. So apparently it has had some work done previously in Denmark Street in London, but she can't remember what was done. But it's coming to me to have the output valves replaced, you know, the amp serviced and gone through to make sure that it's all okay for working use. So let's get this thing apart, have a look inside, and I'll show you what you can do at home if you've got a UK Blues Junior to extend the life of the valves and make the amp run drastically better. Right, Q&A time then. It is grey and miserable out there. It's freezing cold, chucking it down with rain. It's awful. I hate it. Yesterday was really sunny. And these windows here, they're south facing, so you get, when it's a nice day, it's great. I love sitting here. But when it's awful, really brings you down. Anyway, Q&A. Should we get on with it? Question from Curtis Price. He says, greetings. Why would there be zero current draw on power tubes when I have 6.3 volts on the filaments, negative 40 volts on the bias, and 477 volts on the plates? It's driving me crazy. I believe it happened once before when one of the plate leads on the phase inverter had broken off. So that side of the push-pull tubes had no current draw when I was measuring for milliamps. All tubes are good, pre and power. Thanks for anyone knowing the answer. What if you've got no screen supply? That'll switch a valve off. So you need to check that you've got voltage on the pins themselves, on the screen pins. So if your screen supply is dead, the valve often won't conduct. So check that. But just do your basics. Check wiring integrity. Do a full voltage map so you know what's going on where and why. But if they're not conducting any current, then but the filaments are firing up, you've got a bias voltage actually on the pin, and you've got voltage on the plates, then you know what your screen's doing. Check those out. Often you'll find that will be the cause, and that's whether you've got blown screen resistors on the socket, so the voltage isn't actually getting to pin 4. I assume that they're octals, standard octals, but yeah, check those out. That would be my first port of call. But do the basics, do your voltage map. The answer is usually pretty obvious. Okay, first thing we need to do is get the back off the amp. Okay, so V5. Some slight discoloration there. And V4. Yep. Okay, so to convert to 240 volt, what you need to do is, oh, it might have already been done. Might have already been done. Bear with me. Can we see? So we've got 230 volt wiring here, 240 volt wiring here. The only difference is the white with black stripe goes to the switch on the 230 volt wiring, and P6. The black wire goes to P6 on the board, and then 240 volt wiring is the other way around. So the black wire black wire should go to the switch, and the white and black goes to P6. Which is the case here. So this one has already been converted. Well, that's good news. But that's what you would do. You'd swap those two around. Easy enough. Right. So that's the voltage done. To change the bias, you need to change R52, which originally is a 22k resistor. There it is. C minus, which is your bias. R52, that's 22k there. You need to increase that to 33k. So R52, which is this one here. It's a 22k in the amp. We need to make that a 33k. That changes the bias voltage in the amp to cool the bias valves down. Then what you need to do is you need to check 3 further resistors. So R47, which is a 2K2, which on the schematic is up here. 2K2, 2 watt. It's the dropping resistor for the screens. 2K2, what did I say? R47, it's this one here. It actually looks like it's been getting very, very hot. So we're going to have to measure that and swap it out if it's out of spec. And then the final two are the screen droppers themselves, R34 and R35, R36, 100 ohm 1 watts that go to pin 9 of your output valves. We need to check that they are in spec, and if they're not, we need to replace those. So R35, R36. Well, they've already been upgraded to 470 ohms. That's good. You see those, that one there and that one there. So it's had some work done already. This is good news. So all we've got to do really is just change that one resistor there, fit a new set of valves, retake all of our measurements. Unfortunately for us though, in order to do this job properly, I do need to pull the board out, which means removing all the pots and knobs from the front, all the hardware for them, disconnect all the wires, drop the board down, fold it forward, and I can access the from underneath. I don't want to just tack a resistor on top. Always want to do this job properly. So I'm going to crack on with that off camera because I don't want this video to go on for too long, and then I'll show you once I've made some progress. I had quite a few comments on the NAMM video that I did, saying that I'd missed the NAMM, missed the Dumble Amps announcement. Well, yeah, I did miss it because it wasn't shown anywhere. I'll put on the screen now, scrolling, a Google search that I did on Monday morning for Dumble Amps, and there's no articles on it. There are links to a couple of YouTube videos on there, which obviously happened at NAMM, but they're just people talking about Dumble Amps, not necessarily that there's a new model coming out. Speaking of which, I don't know if you know, but the owners of Dumble are now suing quite a few people for using their trademark, obviously. And the reason they're allowed to do that, and the reason I think that they've decided to announce that they're back in business and that they've got a model coming out, is that they need to do that in order to protect those trademarks. So I don't think the amp that they've launched or announced is one that you and I or Joe Public is going to be available to buy. I think they've just put something on the market to protect their trademark. And maybe that, they might have one or two built and given to high-end pro musicians, but based on the videos that I've watched, I don't think you're going to see much. They're certainly not going to be sold in shops, I don't think. But it's all about protecting their trademark, and I know they're suing Justin Harrison, and rightly so, because he was using their trademark, but they needed to have stuff on the market in order to do that. So I think that's what it's all about, and turning up at NAMM and showing this stuff off is just going through that process, to be honest. So yeah, but I don't think there's actually going to be a Dumble amp that you and I can buy. Yeah, so it's not really an announcement, it's more of a protecting your legacy. Okay, board is out. You do need to just undo the nuts for this satellite board for the output jacks. Get that one out first, and that gives you enough clearance just to drop this down and out of the way. Don't forget to do your ground one there. That gives you access to the back of the board, and you can do all the repairs without removing the chassis from the cabinet. So pretty straightforward from here. I'm going to go through and replace those components as required. The amp's now 10 years old, so it's a good idea, if you haven't done them already, to do the IC caps, the filter caps. So I'm going to go ahead and swap those out for something a bit more appropriate, bearing in mind we're not trying to spend a load of money on this amp, so let's not go mad. Whilst we're on the underside, we can give the PCB a good inspection, make sure there's no cracked joints or anything like that, anything that might point to there being further issues, but this is all standard par for the course. On the on one of the videos, can't remember which one it was now, the finishing up the Tweed Deluxe clone, I did say I would explain about putting, so I said that I popped a resistor across the standby switch, and I'd explain what that was for and how that worked, and of course I forgot to film that bit and I didn't put that out, and a couple of you picked up on that and told me off, so I am sorry. So the problem with standby switches is not everyone implements them in the right way, but that's not to say you can't implement them in various ways. And you've got to understand the circuits and what they do and where they've been situated and what they're doing and how they work. But without getting into the whole standby switch argument, which we could argue about for days, if you're going to use a standby switch, make sure you're not putting excess strain and pressure on the circuit that it's in. And one way to do that is to bypass the standby switch with a resistor. That means that when the standby switch is open, a small trickle current can flow, so when the switch is then flipped into play mode, you've preloaded the circuit, for want of a better phrase, already, so there's less strain put on the caps and the switch itself and the transformer and all those things. What value does it need to be? It depends how much voltage and current you want to flow, but a 56k 3-watt resistor is usually ample. It does mean that when the switch is in standby mode, open, the amp will no longer be completely muted, so you have to bear that in mind, but it's putting it into a lower state of operation, and it just keeps everything running along and trickling along fine. So it's often a good idea. In that particular amp, the standby switch was making or breaking the high voltage center tap connection to chassis, and often when you flick those, it puts a huge surge onto the rectifier, onto the reservoir cap. I had an amp in once where it kept blowing caps because that was the way it was. So in that particular scenario, it's a good idea it's definitely a good idea to bypass the cap. You just wire the resistor across the terminals, the switch, sorry. You wire the resistor across the terminals of the switch, and it just protects everything. So that's all it is. Nothing special, but it works a treat. Okay, all back together and on the bench. So I've replaced those resistors as required. I've done the filter caps. I've given it a service. I've reassembled it. I've installed a new set of JJ EL84s, and into 8 ohms we're getting 11.2 volts. And bear in mind, this is a 15 watt amplifier, so 11.2 squared, so times 11.2 divided by 8 ohms, 15.7 watts. Bang on, perfect. And look at that lovely sine wave. Oh yeah. Nice and clean, running great. Treble control, bass control, mid control, master volume, and it's got reverb as well. So it's running great. It's running absolutely brilliantly. Super happy with it. No problem at all. And that's all you got to do. Ian Rose has got a technical question. He says, "Hi Chris, I repair guitars but really enjoy learning more about components, particularly capacitors where paper in oil, bumblebees, etc. can get very expensive. But in my opinion, what difference can be heard for the money? Maybe it's personal taste on what we think we hear. That does play a big part of it. I have been lucky enough to build an amp with you." Oh yes, Ian, yeah, you came and built a 5v3 with me. And no, quality counts at all stages. So my general advice to people is focus on, when it comes to capacitors, it's very easy to get into that, the more expensive they are, the better they must sound. But my advice to people is don't even bother looking into different materials of caps, construction methods, mojo, all that kind of stuff. If you don't know the basics of capacitors already. What I mean by that is, let's say, in this amp that I'm doing a board on now, 22 nanofarad capacitors there, and I like to use these Panasonics. I think they're great, they're fantastic, they work well. If you can't explain to me the sonic difference and also the playing difference and how the amp feels when you change the value of a capacitor, so let's say these are 22s here. If I change these to the next value up, which will be 33 nanofarad, if you can't explain to me what difference that would make, then you definitely can't explain to me the difference between a polyester cap and a paper and oil cap, for example, right? So you've got to understand what the main changes that do actually occur when you change values, for example, before you get into construction types. And I always say that to people. If you can't explain or you don't understand what happens when you change the value of a capacitor, then there's no point going any further. So learn that first. And one that I've always said as a great example is, especially with 5E3s, because 5E3s are a classic amp that beginners like to build and they like to get into. They are pretty tolerant of poor lead dress, and they're quite a small component count. It's a good fun build to do. 5E3 has got 5 coupling capacitors in that circuit. All of them are 100 nanofarad except one of them, which is a 22 nanofarad cap, which is the coupling cap to the cathodine phase inverter. So here's something for you to do at home. Why not change the value of that 22 nanofarad to 100 nanofarad, Play the amp and tell me the difference that you hear. Does it change the top end? Does it change the bottom end? Does it change the way the amp overdrives? Does it add some artifacts that weren't there before? Has it taken something away? Does it make the amp easier to play? Is there better string separation? Or have you gone the other way and made the amp really muddy? Does the amp overdrive in the same way it did before? Is it easier to get the harmonics to jump out? Okay, now put it back to 22 nanofarad and play it again. What difference have you heard going back to the original value? And then you do that for every other cap in that circuit. So the other 100 nanofarads, okay, drop them down to 47s, one at a time. Play the amp, hear the difference, feel the difference, understand what changing that capacitor does for a different value. Once you've understood that, where the cap is in the circuit, what it's doing, and what happens when you change its value, and you've got a proper deep understanding of that, then start to maybe look at different cap construction types. But until you've got that level of knowledge behind that, and you're secure in that, and you understand it, just don't waste your money. Because if you don't know what you're doing, where you're going to end up, you don't know. You can't predict it, right? Okay, cool. Our good friend Fuzznerd says, "Hi Chris, what do you think of the Celestion Peacekeeper? Will you be trying one?" That's the new low output 50 watt speaker, 12-inch speaker from Celestion. They launched it at NAMM. Yeah, I'm going to try it. I like the idea of it. Really cool. High power handling, but low efficiency. It was 86 dB, I think. That's really interesting. But proof is in the pudding. Got to know how it sounds. Got to know how it plays. But yeah, I'm really interested in it. I'm definitely going to get one. Curiously, they haven't announced the price point yet, so we don't know how expensive they're going to be. Hopefully, it's not too expensive. Hopefully, it's quite affordable. I mean, looking at the cost of other 50 watt Celestions from 50 watt ceramic Celestions. I would guess the UK price will be around 100 quid, but you never know. But yeah, really, what a really interesting speaker, and great marketing on it as well. Great marketing. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear it. I mean, that with a 1 watt amp. Yeah, I mean, now we're talking really cool bedroom volumes. So yeah, interesting. Having an absolute fight here. This is the 18 watt clone that we're doing loads of upgrades and stuff on. I just had to pull the board out to get the new output transformer mounted. Can you see? Yeah, you can. But the wire routing in this chassis, as you can see, isn't optimal. I'm trying to get everything to go where I want it to go. Plus, you've got wires coming from places that don't normally come from. You've got double tied grounds here. So I'm just trying to work out in my head if there's a better way of doing half this stuff while I'm in this position. Or do I just want to persevere with it, see where we end up, and then possibly have to, undo and reverse a lot of stuff. So I'm just trying to get my head around it. It's not your standard 18 watt treble middle bass layout, or at least one that makes any sort of common sense. So I'm just, having one of those, staring at something for 5 minutes, trying to work out what on earth is going on. And that's even before I mount the new power transformer. So yeah, I'm just having one of those moments. Must be getting old. But we're getting there. Progress is being made. I promised I'll deliver a great sounding amp, and I'm going to do that. Where's Chilton says, "Man, dirty amps are so common." Talking about the Laney. I just solved a whole bunch of noise, pops, and complete signal loss in a Messer Tremoverg. Well, better you than me, mate. Just by cleaning and tightening the pots and jacks. It was a real mess. Almost a 1/4 inch thick of dust bunnies inside, yeah. you know what? It's amazing, isn't it? People don't look after their amps generally the way they used to. I know some people do, so don't jump on that. But you know, so many amps that come through the door, you know, they're so dirty. Just, you know, people haven't wiped down the Tolex and it's full of dust inside, and you know, all sorts of nasty bits and pieces on it. And you think, just if you looked after your stuff, it'd last a bit longer. But yeah, anyway, he says, I was wondering if I could ask about your dummy load box. How do you deal with heat build-up when doing soak tests on high wattage amps? Did you build it or buy it? What have I got? I've got a switcher box on the wall that switches between my test cab that you can see, the 2x12. There it is. There's my switcher box. It switches between that, and I've got an 8 ohm dummy load, which is a 1000 watt dummy load. But if you actually look at the data sheet for it, it's only 1000 watts when it's heat sunk to something. On its own, it's only 250 watts. So you only get that 1000 watt handling when it's heat sunk to something. That's why it's bolted to the side of my racking unit there. Now, it's very rare that I'm testing an amp that's more than 200 watts clean, so 400 watts max, and again, that's double rated easily. So yeah, it's fine. It runs all day. It's not an issue. I've got other dummy loads which are 2, 4, and 16 ohms, which I use for testing stuff. But yeah, most of the time, if possible, I soak test at 8 ohms because the dummy load, you know, handles that. Because it's got that high power handling, when it's cooking along, it doesn't smell. You know, for those who know, when resistors get hot, after a while, that smell does get annoying. So that's all it is. Just a 1000 watt 8 ohm load up on the racking there, and it just takes it like a pro. So I was thinking about that NAMM video that I did, and as you can tell, I was pretty disappointed. See, when NAMM comes around, it's usually when, you know, all the manufacturers launch, which is when they do their big launches, and they show off all the new stuff they've been coming up with. And it always used to be something you'd really look forward to, where they would bring out not just their standard stuff, but you'd see really, really cool new innovative stuff. I always struggle with that word. And it just seems this year, the name of the game was affordability. You know, everything's, you know, a new affordable range of stuff, right? Yeah, and there was nothing really that was game changing. Yeah, some people brought out some stuff which, you know, is cool, but it just seemed there was nothing that really made you go, oh yeah, I'm going to order that straight away. Definitely not that I saw anyway. After I, you know, recorded that video, I went out and looked and found more news and stuff, and again, it was a more of the same, middle of the road, generic. I mean, it must, if you were a music journalist, it must have been a real tricky show to be at, because you had nothing really awesome to get your teeth into, which is a shame. So it's more my disappointment in you know, the whole industry at the moment. It's just all a bit boring. I want something really cool and, you know, game changing and exciting, and we didn't seem to get that. So someone said Orange did some cool stuff, but I couldn't get past the first minute of watching any of the videos on the Orange stuff. Nothing against Orange, it just wasn't that exciting. So yeah, maybe there's some cool stuff coming at Summer NAMM. You know, the UK guitar show is coming up first weekend of March. I'm not exhibiting, but I am going to pop along and have a look and see if there's anything there, because maybe there'll be something cool that we haven't seen before. Well, here's a fun little job for the afternoon. I need to wire up the boost foot switch, or the underboost foot switch, for Ed's RK50. So yeah, I need to crack on with that, and I just need to have a quick think about which way around it's going to work, because I need to decide whether we want the LED to light up when the amp is in normal mode, and then when you hit the foot switch it underboosts and then the light goes off, or do we want it the other way around, where you connect the pedal to the amp, it automatically switches to underboost mode, and then you'd use the foot switch, LED comes on and it gives you your boost again. I think that's the way it needs to be. So I think that's the way I'm going to do it. So I'm just going to quickly draw out a schematic for it, get this thing wired up, battery powered of course, and then we should be good to go. Also, quite a few comments on the Laney. Now I need to quickly explain as to why there was no fuse in that amp. Now the customer, my customer, said he what am I trying to say, when he took it to the other place and they diagnosed an open circuit mains transformer, he said they told him that they had deactivated the amp to make it safe, whatever that means. So maybe they removed the fuse, the mains fuse, from the amp. My customer, his first language isn't English, but he does speak very good English, but sometimes you get a bit of a lost in translation scenario. So he tried his best to explain to me what was going on or what happened. So it's possible that they removed the mains fuse, but obviously didn't tell him that that's what they had done. So, but yeah, the fault is actually the voltage selector switch. When it should only have the 3 positions, but it's faulty, so it's got those 2 in between ones, and I think that's where the switch was located, or was in. Yeah. So when they tested it, it was possible. It looked like it had been selected for 240 volt, and obviously gave them an open primary reading. But there's still no excuse though. You still, just check it. So what I'm going to do on that amp, customers approved the recap. We're going to clean up all the dielectric grease that's in there. It's all contaminated anyway, so it's all got to be cleaned out. We're going to hardwire the voltage switch for 240 volt. So it's always going to be good. Going to fix the mains, going for the recap, going to fit his valves, can you give it a full service and go through it and make sure it's all good. But yeah, there's no reason why that amp won't run again. But yeah, it's just one of those, do the basics, do them right. If you're charging a customer for something, see, the thing is, if I was going to give a customer a diagnosis on a failed mains transformer, I'd give them the test result. I'd give them the readings. We'd check that it's not shorted to core. Get the mega out and do an installation test, all that stuff. Because you never want to give a diagnosis unless you're 100% sure on it. If you're unsure, do more tests, do further checks on it. If you're going to call a mains transformer, be absolutely sure. And clearly they hadn't done that for whatever reason. So I was tempted to phone them up and ask and record the call for a video, but we won't do that. It's the thing is, it's I'm trying to be really sensible about this. That guy has lost a customer, and I've gained a customer. So, he's if he did his job properly, he probably would have got the the repair job and done it properly, and got that amp up and running. But he's lost that customer, and my customer will probably say to his other friends, "Don't go to that place, come to Rift." So he's lost out, and I've gained something. So yeah, but that just actually did I answer this question? Someone said, "How do you make sure you find a good tech?" Well, you go off personal recommendations, don't you? You do your research. It's the same thing. How do you find a good plumber or an electrician or anything like that? You do your checks. You do your research and you find out. But this particular place that you took it to, it's not a bloke in a shed. It's a proper repair centre. They do a lot of hi-fi and TV stuff and general electronics repair. And I actually had a look on their Facebook page. They do a lot of old, vintage electronics, but why they did that to my customer, I just don't know. So I'm not going to name and shame them. I don't see any benefit in that. I'm brave enough to put my work on the internet and show off what I do and how I work, and I stand by it. And if I make a mistake, I always put my hands up and say so. It speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? I got it right first time. All hooked up. How it works is there needs to be a 1K5 resistor between the tip and ground for the boost to be on, and when the boost is off, i.e. when it's under boosting, it needs to be direct connection to chassis, 0 ohms. So if I turn the foot switch on, we get our roughly 1,500 ohms to ground, and the light comes on. So now when the light comes on, we know we're in boost mode, solo mode. Turn it off. Turn it back on. Turn it off. Perfect. Easy as that. Happy with that. So now I can just test it with the amp. Ed's coming at the weekend to come and try this thing out, see what he thinks about it. But yeah, that's how that works. It's very simple. The battery is only powering the LED. It's not doing anything else. So we could have done it where the LED was powered by the amp itself, but it's just easier to do it with a 9-volt battery, because when it's not plugged in, it's not draining. Right, now just to confirm everything, so the amp is currently in under boost mode. Light is off. Boost. Off. Boost. Off. Perfect. Easy as that. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you very much for watching once again. I've actually got a load of transformers stuck in some delivery depot somewhere. I don't know what's going on, some sorting hub, but they've been there for a whole week now. So, yeah, not very good. So, anyway, as always, please give this video a thumbs up. All your comments, questions down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. I mean, we've smashed that 5K target now. And I've managed to do another 50-60 subscribers in the past week alone, so thank you so much. Please hit the notification bell so you know when new videos are coming out. You may have noticed I've started putting extra stuff out lately, so you don't want to miss that. If you're feeling super generous and you want to support the channel, you can do like these guys did, and I will catch you all at the next one.